decided to do a second video on these particular solar cells. As you can see right here at the end of it, let's get that in focus. It chips very easy. These are very thin wafers and they break very easy. This side right here that I'm showing right now is the positive, and this blue side here is the negative. Just for reference. But these things break very, very, very easy. They chip when they're shipped. So when we are doing projects and we solder a bunch of them together, whether you can solder good or not, I'm one of the persons who cannot solder well. So let's go over some of the projects that we did. We were soldering this board, and as you can see, it chipped. Let's see if we can get that in focus. Got a dark spot. And it's a pretty long board. So, because these solar cells were not flat, that means they have a little gap in there because of the actual solder. They're prone to breakage. Okay? And I got them down there. I soldered them together. But they're prone to breakage if you see this part right here. So let's move on. And we can see another one of these things. Again, let's bring that up into the camera. You see that they're not laying flat. Let's see if we can get a better angle of that. They're not laying flat because, let's see here. The solder. Let's go over some of the solder techniques. As you can see, it's very, very bad technique, and you can see some burn spots. Okay. With that said, with these projects, this actually works. If you measure that and that, it actually works. Okay. So again, it's not functional, and yet it's we'll call that semi-functional, but it's going to be prone to brokerage as that broke, because these things don't lay down and they don't lay flat. So let's look at this one, and we're not going to talk too much about this because again, this right here is something that we don't really mention. It's laying flat and it didn't break, and it's one of the best ones I've done. Even though they're not on there straight, I don't worry about stuff like that. If people don't know what I'm talking about that little gap in here. I just don't worry about that line because it's not straight. I'm looking for functionality, not so much pretty. Okay, so that's done, and we went through it. So what do? Well, we will find a nice piece. I can't find it, so we'll just go. This is foam board. I get it from the Dollar Tree, and I buy them by the hundreds. And but if we can see it here, get a good view, I cut them down into these shapes. Now you wonder, what is that shape? How do you know you got the size you want? Well, one, this is the package the solar cells come in. If you look at the first video I did, you'll see that these fit to protect it as they ship it. It's a piece of plastic. Okay? And then they send you 100. Well, I use that right on there to cut it And I like cutting them a little bit bigger, but again, we'll talk about that later. But that's how we get our cuts, okay? Then I turn this one into this one, because at the bottom of this cell, you have that line in which to make your solder. And if we put that on upside down, it's upside down. Okay, if we put that like this, you'll start to recognize that this is directly in the middle, so you can solder it. And this one, that line right here, see that little line? Let's see if we can get a little pencil or something to point at so people will know what I'm talking about. We're talking about that line right there. It's on the opposite side of that line, which we're going to solder. Okay? So this is the image or the project that we're going to do. Okay? So what does it look like when you glue it down? Because that's what you're going to do. It looks like this. This is glued down. You see that's on the back, and you see that's on the front. This lays flat, and you have room to put a lead here and a lead here to go back down. And that lead from this side comes down and right here. Okay? Which now you can solder. Okay? And if you get another board, let's see if I was looking for a nice size board. Yes, this will do. This is a nice size board. Now, instead of taking this and gluing it straight down into this, what you're going to do is you're going to make a slit down the middle. So this is the part you cut. What am I spelling? That's a G, not a C. C-U-T, cut. And you don't cut all the way, then you cut to right there because you want a bridge there. And then when I take this, I'm going to put that right in the middle. Let's get that into focus. So if that was out of focus, you see where my cut line is. I'm not going to cut this area right here. This is not going to be cut because that's our bridge. We want that bridge to go all the way up here. And this won't be cut. This won't be cut, just in the middle. So it's like a little square is going to be cut. Why? We want that right in the middle. Now, why do we do that? Because all the messy wires, all the what's names will be on the back here, and we'll be able to get to them. Okay? So, now the wires don't interfere of this laying flat. That means even if I put solder here and there, all of a sudden, because this has a hole, it'll sit in that hole and lay flat. This is the surface that I would glue. This is the surface I would glue. I would glue that down, making that so it won't move around. And then I have a panel. Now, once I glue all these down and let it dry, set in focus and let it dry, I then can go back and solder because I can get to all the wires on the back. Okay? So, I hope that was an explanation on how to do that. I was going to show you how I cut these, but let me see if I can get a good demonstration of that. Okay, I think this looks good for being unprofessional. Again, I'm just trying to show people like myself that you can do this without being a professional. Okay, I'm going to try to do this as fast as possible. Everybody should know what that is. It lifts up. You can cut it. I'm going to take this scrap piece and I'm going to... Is that in the way? Look at that. Let's see if we can get a good angle of that. Okay. So it goes right up here because I measured it. And I lay it flat. Okay. I then put this down and I cut. I can hear it cut. Okay. Now, you can see that cut. Well, some of you should be able to see that cut. And then I just flip it over and I do it again because it's very thick. And I just made one of my panel cuts. So I'll be able to reach in there and look at that. Nice smooth edge. Okay. So now I have to cut this to size. Because if I look at it, I have a size that's too big. Okay, so how do I get it to size? Well, I made a second. It's up here. Okay, it's a little bit harder to see. Let's see if I can get that. Okay, so this second one I did, I measured it and taped it down. That tape will come up. So I put that right up to there and make sure that it's flat. And then I come down and I do the same thing. I made one cut there. I just flip it over and I make second cut there. And this thing should break cleanly. Okay, let's get that out of the way. And now let's move this out of the way so we can see. I just cut this angle. Okay, let's measure it. Let's see if my little panel disappeared on me. But okay, since that's not is I measure it. That's how I measure it. It's perfectly even. It may be just a little off, but again, that's how I cut my panels. So then I'll show you some pictures of what they look like. I put them in a box like that. And now we can start to see when I do this, I prep all this stuff. I can now just do that. And that's how I take one of these most difficult solars and solder them all up. So my second prep is now to go underneath, start to solder it. Remember, this will be placed on one of these foam boards. So when I'm soldering, I'm putting pressure on it, it's absolutely flat. And then when I flip it over, the reason why this little edge is there, because I know people want to cut all the way through, is because when you're putting pressure on this side, the negative side, it has something flat to push down on without breaking, because it's glued to that edge. That's why we have this bridge here. Okay, I think I explained that right. Don't worry about if all these are not even. Just don't even worry about them. You glue them down and space them for the project that we did. It does not have to be professional. These are, you make them. And as you see, I think that looks pretty good. And once they're glued in space, they're not going to move around. When they're put to the board, you have room on underneath where the wires and stuff are not going to get away of it laying flat. and then they're not as much prone to breaking. And that's one of the things I've done. You see, I've done quite a few. Okay. So, this is how an unprofessional, a person who is a beginner, takes some of the most difficult solar panels, which are these, and we solder them. And then, like I said, I'll go into solder them, but you've seen how well I solder, but all that'll be hidden underneath. All right, I think that's pretty good explanation. I have more techniques. Some of them I talk about, some of them I don't talk about, but this one we said let's give it to them for free. Again, I write books. This is Media Library. Thank you for listening to me.